Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, Japan will reinterpret its decades-long pacifist constitution to allow its military to aid friendly nations under attack. Korea urges Japan to carry out follow-up measures in a transparent manner. Seoul rejects Pyongyang's proposal to halt all hostile military acts between the two Koreas, calling on the North to take steps towards denuclearization rather than making insincere peace gestures. Plus, Korea posts record exports in the first half of the year, thanks to recoveries in advanced economies. But experts warn that strengthening Korean won will hurt the country's competitiveness. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, July 2nd. Here in Seoul, I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. We begin with a landmark decision out of Tokyo, where the cabinet there has given the green light for a historic shift in Japan's military policy. Gone is a decades-long ban on the right to collective self-defense, meaning this means Japanese troops will now be allowed to fight overseas in defense of friendly nations. Korea is urging the Abe administration in Tokyo to adhere to the basic spirit of the pacifist constitution and carry out any follow-up measures in a transparent manner. Song Ji-son reports.
A ban that dates back to the end of World War II lifted. In a significant recasting of military policy away from its pacifist policies, the Abe administration has reclaimed the right to send its soldiers into battle even when the country is not under direct attack. Following approval by lawmakers on Tuesday, the cabinet adopted a resolution dropping a ban that has kept the military from fighting overseas since World War II. This means Japanese troops will be able to come to the aid of allies if they come under attack from a common enemy, even if Japan is not the subject of the attack. Tokyo will also be able to take on a greater role in UN peacekeeping missions.
For the sake of world stability and peace, Japan will contribute more than it has up to this point.
After losing World War II, Japan was forced to dismantle its military and adopt a constitution that allows the use of arms only in the event it is attacked on its territory. But interpretations of the constitution have since been stretched over the years to allow for the strengthening of Japan's self-defense forces. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been aggressively pursuing the change since taking office. But Korea and China, major victims of Japan's past wartime aggression, have expressed opposition.
The Japanese government must proceed in a transparent manner that guarantees peace and stability in the region. And at the same time, it must also earn its neighbors' trust by putting an end to its distortion of past wrongdoings.
South Korea's foreign ministry has said the Japanese forces will not be allowed on the Korean peninsula without prior consent. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
North Korea and Japan have been hammering out the details of a previous deal that promises to reopen an investigation into the abductions of Japanese nationals decades ago. Tuesday's meeting in Beijing went ahead despite speculation Japan might pull out in protest of North Korea's launch of 2 short-range missiles over the East Sea between Korea and Japan over this last weekend. Yulian reports.
Tuesday's high-level meeting between Japan and North Korea began with an exchange of strong words over Pyongyang's firing of 2 short-range missiles into the East Sea between the two nations over the weekend. In his opening remarks, Japan's chief delegate to the talks, Junichi Ihara, launched a strong protest against the launch, calling it a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. His North Korean counterpart Song Il-ho said Pyongyang has made it clear that they do not recognize the resolutions and insisted that the test firings were safe and fully consistent with maintaining peace and stability in the region. despite the tensions, the two countries did agree to continue constructive talks on reinvestigating the abduction of Japanese nationals by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. In a diplomatic breakthrough, the two countries struck a deal in Stockholm last month on reopening the abduction probe. In return, Japan has promised to lift some sanctions and resume humanitarian aid to North Korea. Pyongyang on Tuesday reportedly briefed Japan about the special investigative team it has assembled to look into the Japanese abductee issue. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is looking over the details and is expected to decide on Wednesday whether his government will lift partial sanctions on the communist state, and if so, to what scale. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has turned down a proposal by North Korea to end all cross-border hostilities, which they say includes regular military drills with the United States. Seoul says peace can only be realized once Pyongyang takes serious steps to dismantle its nuclear program. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
South Korea rejected on Tuesday North Korea's so-called special proposal to end all military hostilities between the two Koreas. On Monday, the North proposed to halt cross-border slandering and military provocations starting Friday and called for upcoming joint military drills between Seoul and Washington to be canceled. Sound familiar? The regime had made a similar proposal earlier this year in what it called an important proposal.
North Korea proposed in January to end cross-border slandering but broke the inter-Korean agreement shortly thereafter and has been hurling offensive remarks at our leader and launching provocations ever since.
Calling the latest proposal nonsense and insincere, Seoul's Unification Ministry said North Korea's nuclear and missile development programs are the biggest threats on the Korean peninsula. The ministry said North Korea must let go of its nuclear program if it really wants lasting peace in the region. On what had motivated Pyongyang to make the sudden proposal, an official at the ministry said the regime may have been attempting to show its efforts at mending inter-Korean ties ahead of Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul this week. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's new defense minister, Han Min-gu, has vowed that Seoul will immediately and forcefully respond to any further North Korean provocations. The defense chief made the remarks Tuesday during a visit to Yeonpyeong-do and Baekryong-do Islands, located just south of the de facto Western Sea border between the two Koreas. Han said the military has orders to launch immediate counterattacks in case of provocations, not only to the source of the provocation, but also to supporting forces and military commanders. He stressed that if North Korea ever attempted another provocation like its shelling of Yeonpyeong-do Island, South Korea will effectively retaliate against the North. North Korea's artillery attack on Yeonpyeong-do Island in November 2010 killed 4 South Koreans, including 2 civilians. The leaders of South Korea and China will adopt a joint statement following their summit talks later this week, which the Chinese Foreign Ministry says will include both countries' common perceptions on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. In a press conference Tuesday, Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Liu Junmin said ways to make the peninsula nuclear-free will be one of the main agendas of the talks between South Korean President Park Geun-hye and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The minister says it's the Chinese government's basic policy to pursue the denuclearization of the peninsula and to keep peace and stability in the region by resolving matters peacefully. He added, as both countries are deeply concerned about Japan's perception of history, the two leaders will naturally touch on related issues to do with that as well. Chinese President Xi arrives in Seoul on Thursday for a 2-day visit. Now, a government investigation into what caused April's deadly ferry disaster is well underway, but the victims' families are far from satisfied with those who were tasked with leading it. A group of them lashed out at government officials and lawmakers on Tuesday, saying they had insincere attitudes. A special parliamentary session held on Monday was not broadcast live on television, and in some cases, in fact, officials left early to attend other events. An initial investigation indicated the disaster was likely caused by the Sewol-ho ferry making a sharp turn, also overloading and excessive remodeling of the vessel.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korean exports reached a record high in the first half of the year, backed by strong shipments of mobile communication devices and semiconductors to advanced economies. Our Connie Kim has this report.
Korea's exports hit a new record high in terms of dollar value in the first half of this year, backed by the recovery in major economies. That means Korea sold close to $2.3 billion worth of goods overseas every day, up 4.5% on year. Exports to advanced economies played a major role in the jump. Shipments to the European Union rose by more than 11%, and those to the United States inched up about 8%. Shipments of mobile communication devices saw the steepest gains, followed by semiconductors and steel. But some experts are not excited about the data, as it's not as rosy as it sounds.
The 2.6% rise in exports is lower than expected. Emerging economies are catching up quickly with Korean technology, which still lags behind advanced nations. The strengthening of the won was also a factor in the lowering of the nation's total exports.
The strong Korean won, which is hurting Korean exporters' price competitiveness overseas, is a factor that kept the trade performance from meeting expectations. The Korean won gained more than 3% against the dollar in the first 6 months of this year. And it's a major culprit that's hurting the outlook for the Korean economy.
We were expecting exports to increase about 5 to 6% this year, but with the 2.6% growth in exports in the first half of this year, the growth rate is not expected to pick up. The export growth for this year is not expected to reach 5%.
Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's largest automaker is leaving a very good impression on consumers in the world's largest new car market. Hyundai Motor has come in at #1 on the Sales Satisfaction Index in China for the first time ever. The survey conducted by JD Power has Hyundai Motor tied for first on the list, along with French manufacturer Citroën. Tariffs on imported European autos like Citroën have been lowered or even eliminated as part of Korea's free trade agreement with the European Union, which entered its 4th year on Tuesday. Tariffs imposed on imported cars with an engine of 1.5 litres or larger have been lifted completely, while tariffs levied on cars with smaller engines have been lowered from 4% to 2.6%. The price of a Volkswagen Phaeton will go down by just over $1,000, and the maximum price cut for a Mercedes-Benz will amount to roughly $2,200. Now, in financial news, Korea's stock market has been losing momentum in recent weeks, with the benchmark Kospi fluctuating by the smallest margin ever over the first 6 months of this year. Hwang Jie has this report.
It's as if the Korean stock market has had its pause button pushed. The Korea Exchange says the nation's benchmark Kospi is losing its vitality, with market volatility in the first half of the year hitting a mere 0.6, its lowest point since 1990 when the market first opened. The closer the index is to zero, the more stagnant the market. The figure was at over 2 in the second half of 2011, but has continued on a downward trend ever since. And it's not just the dynamism, but also the number of transactions that remains subdued. The average daily transactions volume on the nation's main bourse came in at around 23 million in the first half of this year, marking the lowest level in 7.5 years. Analysts attribute the lackluster performance over the past 3 years to sluggish domestic demand and the slowing Chinese economy.
Korea is heavily dependent on exports to China. The nation's industries are also closely linked to those in China, so the slumping economy there had a major impact on the economy here.
Analysts add that the recent strength in the local currency trend has eroded the profitability of local companies and is keeping the stock market from perking up. But they also forecast better conditions in the second half. They say the global economy, more importantly the U.S. economy, is on a rebound trend, which will result in more robust exports for Korea, eventually raise local corporate profitability and put some pep in the stock market's step. 황지혜, Arirang News.
Now, some very significant news for the nation's older people, because a new pension program for senior citizens aged 65 and above went into effect in Korea on Tuesday. Under the revised program, approved by the National Assembly back in May, monthly installments of up to $198 will be paid to seniors in the bottom 70% income bracket. Those already receiving a senior pension from the government don't need to apply. If they meet the qualifications, applicants will receive their first pension payments later this month. New applicants will receive their monthly pensions from August, following a screening process to determine their eligibility. Time now for a look through the international headlines we are following this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. Israel is warning of more reprisals against Palestinian faction Hamas, whom it is confident was behind the kidnap and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank on Monday. In a televised address Tuesday night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the nation Hamas is responsible, Hamas will pay, Hamas will continue to pay, outlining the military goals of taking the murderers into custody, continuing to strike Hamas targets in the West Bank, and expanding the operation in Gaza as necessary. More than 30 airstrikes were launched on Hamas overnight. Hours before, Netanyahu attended the joint funeral ceremony for the 3 teens who were last seen alive hitchhiking home. Their bodies were wrapped in Israeli flags as thousands gathered to mourn. President Shimon Peres called them 3 outstanding boys, sons of the entire nation. They were buried next to each other after the funeral at Modi'in. Travelers headed for the U.S. this summer could face tougher security screening at airports as U.S. federal authorities are considering stronger security measures. The move would come as chaos grips Syria and Iraq, creating a safe haven for terrorist groups. It also would come amid concerns about a new type of bomb designed to bypass current screening methods increase. The explosives are believed to be in the developing stages by terrorists from Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. In an unprecedented move, French police have detained former President Nicolas Sarkozy for questioning over suspicions he used his power illegally. He was grilled on whether he had pursued inside information from a high-ranking judge related to a campaign funding probe in exchange for the promise of a distinguished role in Monaco. Investigators also called in the judge in question, as well as a second judge and Sarkozy's lawyer. Sarkozy has maintained the charges are politically motivated. They are being seen as a blow to the former leader's ambitions for another presidential run in 2017. And finally, 68 more people have fallen to the Ebola virus since last Monday. This according to the World Health Organization, which reported that the death toll tied to the deadly virus has risen to nearly 470, marking a 20% increase in just the past 10 days. It marks the largest outbreak in West Africa, which has affected people in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. There is no cure for the hemorrhagic fever and is spread by contact with infected people or animals via fluids such as urine, sweat, and blood.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean national football team, as the future of manager Hong Myung-bo might be decided sometime this week after the KFA stated that a meeting is scheduled. Now, according to the statement issued by the Korea Football Association, the president of the KFA, Chung Mong-gyu, will be meeting with manager Hong Myung-bo to sit down and talk about his future. The KFA added that it's unfair to remove him from the post just because of the recent poor showing at the Brazil World Cup. Meanwhile, many experts still speculate that manager Hong Myung-bo will resign after the meeting. And staying with football and continuing on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage, as two more round of 16 matches took place earlier today, including Argentina taking on Switzerland. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, both sides going back and forth in this match, and even after 90 minutes, a scoreless 0-0 draw. With the match approaching 128th minute, it looked like another penalty shootout, but Angel Di Maria says no way as he sends one past the goalkeeper in the 118th minute, giving Argentina the 1-0 win as they advance to the semifinals. Meanwhile, Belgium and the U.S. currently in the second half still scoreless, 0-0. And now moving over to some Tuesday night's KBO action, the LG Twins get a walk-off win in the 11th inning over the Hanwha Eagles 1-0, with the Tucson Bears holding on to beat the Kia Tigers 4-3, and the NC Dinos win one over the SK Wyverns 5-4. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Lotte Giants take on the Nexen Heroes. Of course, going into the game here, first inning of the game, Park Jong-yoon RBI single to right gives the Lotte Giants the early 1-0 lead. Second inning, Kang Jong-ho drills this one to deep right center field, gone, and we're tied 1-1. Bottom of the third inning, Lotte up 2-1. Ho Do-hwan sends this one to deep center, and there it goes. We're tied again, 2-2. Same inning, next up 4-2. Kang Jong-ho once again, and this one number 24 on the season, and Nexen has the lead 6-2. Now, fifth inning, Choi Jun-suk at bat and deep to right, back, gone, and it's 6-3. Sixth inning, Chung-hoon this time, and this one another dinger, cuts the deficit 6-4. But wait a second, seventh inning, Kang Min-ho with the man on, and hello and goodbye, a two-run shot, and we're tied 6-6. But Nexen answers back with 6 more runs in the bottom of the seventh inning as they win the slugfest 12-7, your final score. And now finishing things off with some exciting news for all the UFC fans here in Asia and around, of course, Asia, as Dana White, the president of Ultimate Fighting Championship, announced in a recent press conference that he's planning a tournament between Korea, China, and Japan. Dana White, who's currently in Japan for the upcoming Fight Night event in Japan, stated that the UFC plans to hold an 8-month-long UFC tournament between fighters from the three nations. He added that, quote, when you go into a market and you have thousands of years of history between people, it's a home run. Meanwhile, the UFC hopes to host their first event in Korea in the near future. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather update. Boy, wasn't it scorching hot yesterday? And I'm sure a lot of you felt the same way. But most of the regions, thankfully, will get a relief from the heat today as the monsoonal front will be traveling northward, dropping downpours to southern regions and showers to the rest of the region. So as we can see, the rain clouds are moving on northbound, dropping heavy downpour to Jeju area. And soon the rest of the country will see showers, so don't forget to have an umbrella on your way out today. And with this rainfall, highs will be a tad lower than yesterday, so let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 22, then the high will rise to 30, while Daegu and Gwangju will have a daily high of 28 and 27 respectively, and Busan should make it to 24 later in the afternoon. Now for other regions, down on Jeju and Daejeon should see a high of 22 and 29. Dokdo will reach 25, while Mount Keungang hikes up to 19. Well, that's all for me at this hour. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jion. And those are stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time. And we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.